What is up, people? Van from the Vaniverse Gaming channel here, bringing you another video. Today's video is going to be on a game called Pathfinder Kingmaker. They just released a definitive edition on the PC recently, probably in the last week or so, and it added a whole bunch of bug fixes and changes, but the big thing that it added to the game is a turn-based mode. And so I want to use this video to kind of go over how the turn-based mode is, and if it's a game that you should probably buy if you like this style game, or if it's a game that you maybe want to reload on your Steam if you purchased it in 2018 and you haven't played it in a while and you want to check out what the new turn-based mode looks like. So let's get in the video. First thing we're going to kind of talk about is what is Pathfinder and what is Pathfinder Kingmaker, so the people who have never seen or heard of this game before can kind of understand where we are. So Pathfinder is a tabletop role-playing game very similar to Dungeons & Dragons. It used the 3.5 Dungeons & Dragons rule set, and since that time they have like a Pathfinder 2 and a Pathfinder 1. But this whole game and how you build your characters and how it operates and the mechanics of it is all based on the Pathfinder tabletop. And in addition, Pathfinder has separate modules that you run your characters through, or campaigns, and Kingmaker was one of those campaign modules, and so this entire game is kind of based on that Kingmaker module. So that's kind of what we're working with. Now, when the game first originally came out in 2018, it was a CRPG with pause. So basically, all of the combat happened in real time, and then you would pause the game, and then you would drink potions and tee up spells and kind of target who you wanted to target. And so it kind of operated very similar like some of the old school games where you highlight a whole bunch of people and you move them kind of all at one time, like a Baldur's Gate. And to me, when you're playing a game that is based on a tabletop, like an RPG as Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons, having a turn-based mode makes it feel more engaging, especially to the player who comes from that world. You know, when you play video games and you don't play the actual tabletop RPG, it probably doesn't affect you as much because you're kind of used to this style. What I think has happened is that Divinity Original Sin 2 has kind of set the bar for how an RPG should function, and almost every CRPG that has come out in the recent history has all been adding these turn-based modes. You know, Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire has a turn-based mode. You know, Solasta is coming out. That's going to be turn-based. Baldur's Gate 3, which is made by Larian, that's going to be turn-based. You know, all the XCOM games are turn-based. The Wasteland 3 game, turn-based. So it's just right now the turn-based tactical RPGs are a big thing. And so going back to an RPG like this and adding turn-based, I think it just makes the game 10 times better. I actually found myself playing characters this time through that I didn't play in the first one because I just didn't feel like they could do anything. And now, because it's turn-based, you can kind of tee your characters up to where, like, if you cast a spell and it's on the ground, you don't have to worry about hitting unpause and all of your characters run into that spell, like a grease spell, right? I want to grease the enemies. I don't want to grease my team. And so when I cast grease on the ground and the enemies are in it, they're going to slip and slide. If I was playing the whole pause, action type combat, when I'd unpause, all my creatures would run towards them and then they would probably slip in the grease. The way I can do it now, since it's turn-based, is I can actually move my characters kind of around to be on the outside of the grease so they can still make those attacks and hopefully not slip. I just feel like the turn-based mode gives you more ability to really choose what you want each character to do and have a chance that each character is more successful at what they do. And I really think it helps with spellcasters the most. Like, half of the spells I never used in the original game when it first came out, because what I would do is I would just stealth the entire party. I'd give them all range weapons, and then I would just unpause, and literally they would all fire range weapons at whatever creature, and they would kill it most likely before I even got into a combat. The way the turn-based mode works is that if you're all stealth and you attack, when you get into combat, you get one free surprise round where you can do some damage, and then after that, you can keep fighting. So not only can you not cheese the game like you could before there was tactical mode, it also makes it feel like when you're entering into combat, you're having more fun with each character and using spells and using their charge. Like when I played the game in 2018 when it came out, I never used the charge ability. But in the turn-based mode, I pretty much use the charge ability on almost every character to get them into the fight. Same with like Hideous Laughter. You know, when I played the game originally, when I would use Lindsay the Bard, I would constantly be casting Inspiration and just shooting people with my crossbow, but I never used a lot of the spells that are just huge, impactful spells like Grease and Hideous Laughter. You know, I fought in a couple of these fights where, you know, there's this really big bad enemy that hits extremely hard, like a troll. You know, when you first fight the troll and you're kind of low level, and you hit him with a Hideous Laughter and he falls down on the ground for several turns. It feels like that Hideous Laughter spell had way more effect on the combat than if I was basically, you know, putting all my people in, unpausing, pausing again, and just having combat go that way. Because you can't really gauge on what each character's doing and when they're all making attacks. Like you see the little tick mark above their head on when they're ready to attack again, but it just felt different. So anyone who has played Divinity Original Sin 2 will probably like this. It is not without its problems. So there's one thing about it that I find to be extremely frustrating with the new turn-based mode. Before I get into that, let me just tell you, turn-based mode is something that you don't turn it on and it stays on for the remainder of the game. You can literally toggle it on and off as you play. So right now, you'll see on my screen, there's an hourglass on the bottom left, and then there's a red, it looks like a rook on a chessboard. And that is the button that you choose to switch between turn-based and pause combat. And so at any time, if you don't want to do turn-based, you just switch it off, and then you go back to the pause combat. And so it's kind of nice that this version of the game, because turn-based mode was added after, that you can go back and forth. You know, if you don't want to do turn-based for a specific fight, then don't do it. And if you want to do turn-based for a different fight, then you can turn it back on. The one thing that I found wrong with the turn-based mode, and I don't know if it's been patched yet or not, is when your creatures or when your party members get feared, they try and run away. For some reason in turn-based mode, they only run a certain distance and they stop. And then the turn-based mode just kind of stops. And you wait there. And you're like, well, okay, is he going to finish his turn so I can go on to the next guy? And it feels like he never actually finishes his turn. So then you toggle on the non-turn-based mode to try and get them to finish their turn, and then toggle it back off and keep retoggling it. I did that over and over again, and it got really frustrating because I was trying to fight something that kept fearing my guys, and it was just really annoying to have to turn off the turn-based mode and turn it back on to kind of get each guy to run the direction they wanted. If they had open ground to run, they would run the full distance, and then the turn would be over. But if they were like up against some terrain, like a mountain or whatever, the turn-based mode was not smart enough to know what to do, so it would run very few feet, and then it would just stop, and then the whole thing would lock up. So there do seem to be a couple little bugs with turn-based mode since it's been added after, but it's nothing that I would say is a game-breaking issue. I mean, you do fight a lot of stuff that has a fear mechanic that frightened, but for the most part, it's not a big deal. You just turn on the non-turn-based mode, and then you turn it back off. So that's kind of my opinion about the game. I can kind of go more into Kingmaker and what it is. You know, there's a giant world map, and it's like moving a chess piece across the world map, and you find specific locations, and each location you unlock. There's different quests that you get by going to those different locations, and the whole time you're progressing through, you're trying to follow the story. Eventually, once you get through the story, you actually unlock the entire region and you become a kingmaker, where basically you are now in charge of running the region and building up your town and making different decisions, trying to be into politics on neighboring factions and the whole thing. But the great thing about this game is that if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. There's pretty much a mode that you turn on, and you can skip that entire part of the game. If you have no interest in doing the politicking and trying to figure out how to make your whole kingdom better, then you can just let your advisors do it all and just bypass it completely. So that's another good thing about the game, is that if you like a little bit of a reprieve from the fighting consistently, you can then do this whole, region mode where you're managing your kingdom. And it's very time consuming. I mean, if you wanted to focus on it every day, you could just constantly push the time past one by one by one, and then continue doing that versus going out and adventuring. Eventually, you get to the point where you have to go out and adventure. You can't push time any further, because if you do, you're going to mess up some things. But for the most part, you can push time and stay in that kind of kingdom management mode for a while, or you can go and kind of run around and fight stuff and level up your characters. So hopefully this was a decent video on exactly what the turn-based mode does and kind of how it functions. If you have any questions on what you're seeing on the screen as the turn-based mode's going, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. But I would highly suggest, if you are a fan of Pathfinder, the tabletop RPG, or even Dungeons & Dragons tabletop RPGs, this game in turn-based mode is a whole different ballgame, and it's a lot of fun. So if you haven't purchased it and you like turn-based tabletop games, this is probably a game for you. If you've already purchased it on Steam and you haven't played it in 2 years, now might be a time to go back and try it in turn-based mode to see if it's worth it. I know it was 100 hours the first time, so you may not want to go back and put in another 100 hours, but I'm really enjoying myself this time around and really having more fun with the game in turn-based mode than I did originally. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like below. And like I said, any comments you have, I'll try and answer. I answer all comments on my channel. It might take me a week, but I'll get an answer to it. Just hang on. This is Van from the Vaniverse Gaming channel. Appreciate you guys watching. Cheers and peace out.